sort of what I used to be passionate about.
Yeah. Okay, now I believe we are reaching the time to start the next series, the next edition of ArbitRAAtion Kitchen. And today we will cook salad with Japanese-style ginger dressing, golden butterflied shrimp and hibachi shrimps and fried rice. And we'll talk to Michael DeLee, who is Vice President of AAA-ICDR Asia Case Management Center. And I understand that it's almost evening in Singapore, it's daylight in Europe and in Russia, and we have early morning in the United States, but still, I believe our participants will enjoy getting some lessons how to cook. And you choose to prepare 4 dishes today, right?
Yes, I did.
And why you decided to prepare 4 dishes? What made you to make this choice?
That's a very interesting question. Well, first of all, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. It's such a pleasure to join you. My passport actually says I am American, but I was actually born in Korea. And that sort of explained why I'm such an incredibly good looking. But I was born in Korea, but when I was in the United States, I used to work at a Japanese restaurant as a chef. And then now I live in Singapore. So when you say pick a dish of your origin or your country, I really didn't know which country to pick. I didn't want to pick American because, you know, the food from United States is really just barbecue or hamburgers, which I didn't want to really cook. So I thought I would bring you sort of a mix of Asian cultures. So some Japanese, some Korean, maybe even some Chinese. So mix them up. I wanted to change it just a little bit to spice things up.
Yeah, and the first dish we are going to make today is Japanese style salad with ginger dressing. Michael nicely prepared a video, and I believe we're watching a very professional style of presenting our ArbitRAAtion kitchen. So Michael prepared a very beautiful video, and I'm going to show this video now to our participants, where he explains how to prepare salad. Just a second. Here it is.
The first dish I'm going to make today is a simple salad. A Japanese style ginger dressing salad, to be precise. Now, this is sort of a dressing that you'll find when you go to Japanese restaurants in the United States. I've never really been to Russia or Japanese restaurants in Russia, so I wouldn't really know what sort of a salad dressing that you'll get. But the key point that I wanted to make for this dish is not the lettuce or greens that you may put on your salad, but the little trick that restaurants usually have for the ginger dressing. I'm going to make 2 different versions of the dressing. First one is simple with lemon, onion, ginger, soy sauce, sugar, and vinegar. And the second one is not too different from all this. We're just going to add a little bit of ketchup, mayo, and olive oil to make it a little bit rich. And I have already pre-cut the lettuce. What I did was I soaked it in water for a few hours and put it in the fridge so the lettuce become crispier. Now that the lettuce is ready, let's start the dressing. Now for this recipe, we're going to use 1 whole onion. Since we're going to blend it, we don't have to do any sort of a fine cutting, so we just rough cut it. Now for the ginger. We don't have to use so much ginger. Ginger can be quite strong. Now there we are going to use a little bit of soy sauce and the sugar and the vinegar. And I'm going to use a little bit of lemon peel. We are also going to use the inside of the lemon. Now we're going to blend it. Now we're done with the first part of the ginger dressing. It's really a simple dressing. Perfect. Now we're gonna use only half of this for the second one. So I'll make the first batch and put the first dressing here. And on top of this, we are going to use mayo. And the ketchup. And a little bit of olive oil. Now the second dressing is ready. So this one should have a little lighter color because of mayo and the ketchup that we put in. I don't know if you can tell, but this will be a little bit richer than the first one, but they're both healthy. Just second one has a little bit of mayo and olive oil. And the first dish is basically done. To the lettuce that we have, we're gonna put the second batch. And now we have the first dish.
This is excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I understand that the main art with the first dish is the dressing, not the vegetables, because vegetables are pretty simple, but the dressing itself is really, really a piece of art.
Yeah, I think you should really try it. It's actually very good. It's sweet, it's tangy, and typically, you get this in Japanese restaurants in the United States, and people really can't figure out how to make it. So,
while our participants will try to repeat what you've done in, I believe, 6 or 7 minutes, because of course, when you have everything prepared and with professional skills like you have, it takes, just 5 minutes or 6 minutes to cook, but it might take a little bit more for our participants to do the same. So meanwhile, meantime, I'd like to ask you some questions about
sure.
if you allow. You kindly shared with me some of your private photos. And I like, and I understand that these are your 2 daughters.
Yes, they're putting a makeup on me. They're treating me as a doll, but there are other pictures that I couldn't send you because I look too pretty. But they do play on me and with me. So that's my two girls.
Was it a special occasion What they
No, it's just, I think it was just ordinary Wednesday night. We try to do this every night.
Yeah, it looks indeed very interesting. And I understand that your daughters also play tennis.
Yes, if you see on the left side of your screen, there's a little ball machine. And when you play tennis, you always need a partner. But it's difficult to, sort of find a partner. So what I got was a ball machine so I could play without having to stop. And then my girls decided that, they're going to intervene and then become a partner for me, but they weren't any good. So we decided to give it a shot. And I think we do that not as often as we want to now, but I am trying to train them just so they can play maybe not next Sharapova, but somebody who's decent.
Yeah, but it's pretty hot in Singapore. My recollection is, and it's very difficult to play during daytime. Or
Yes, that's right.
Air conditioning area, or is it open area for tennis?
Yeah, it's this one. I think almost all sort of condominiums have open tennis court, and there are some indoor tennis court with air conditioning, but I think they're quite expensive. And this one, is right on our condo. So, but you have to avoid from 10 to 10 a.m. to, let's say, 5 p.m. because of the humidity. You sweat like, pig. So we try to do it around 7 to 8, or during the weekdays, early in the morning from 9 to 10 on weekends.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And very beautiful photo. I like it very much. And I understood that these photos were taken by your wife.
Yes.
When we discussed it before, I saw that she is a professional photographer. Because it was done in a very professional way, and the photos are done in a very professional way. So here I understand you are creating some paintings together with your daughters. Or is it in
Yes.
where it is, where you're sitting?
This actually is in my old office. They used to come in right after school because we used to live close to my office, but now we live kind of far from the office. But this one, when we used to live close to the office, they'll come to the office right after school and have lunch with me, and then refuse to leave. And they start bothering me by doing that. So until I, play with them for at least a couple of hours, and then they get tired and they want to go home. So, but we really didn't have anything sort of a nice pictures because it's hard to find the time to take a picture. And I remember this particular day, the kids seemed happy. So my wife said, let's just take one. So I'm glad she did. So we have something.
Well, this is very, very beautiful picture, as well as this one.
Yeah, this one is, they got into Lego. Boy, Lego is an expensive hobby. They're not cheap. So we bought this in Malaysia, and then we brought it back. And then it took me, I think, a day and a half. They were interested in first 30 minutes, but then they lost interest. So I had to figure out how to assemble all this. It took me a day and a half. And as soon as I finished it, they dropped it on the floor and then wrecked it. So we can no longer find all the pieces.
Well, that's the problem with Lego, because it's easy to start, but not easy to finish. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to kill a couple of days for it.
Yeah. And then when they broke it, I couldn't, start from the beginning because I don't know which part broke.
So you don't have even photo of what you assembled, right?
No, we have an assembly book, but I think when we're done with the whole thing, I think we threw away the assembly book because we finished assembling, didn't know that I had to rebuild it from scratch. So I never got to it.
Yeah, it's a pity. And here, what I could read on a photo is Kelly's the first day of school.
Yes.
On 2nd January 2019, is it?
Yeah, we have two similar pictures. One is for the second one, Kelly. The next one is the picture for Ellie. That's the first one. And since I don't get to take them to school every day, I tried at least for their first day of school, I would tag along, and then we had to usually walk to the school because the schools are not too far. So this is 2 days that I sort of chose to make sure to follow them to school. And I couldn't pick them up, but I thought this was an important day for them.
What I know is they start school in January.
Yeah.
Because, well, in Russia, we normally start in September. I also know that in other countries, generally is middle of the year where in a school. But in Singapore, you start in January, might be because you don't have summer and winter. So, and you know, all lifestyle looks different.
Yeah, every day feels the same. There's no seasonal change. If there is any, I think there's a rainy days, rainy season. So the school's kind of odd. It took us some time to get used to it, but they break it down to 4 semesters per year. I think each semester is about 2 months. And then they have a little break in between. So from January to March, and then they have a little break, and then they have another semester, and then have a summer break. But now, you know, from I think February of this year, the COVID-19 was hard for everybody, so they've been staying home, been driving me crazy.
Yeah. By the way, how's the situation with pandemic in Singapore? Do you still have lockdown of companies, or you did not introduce it at all? What is the situation?
Oh, yes. Just last Thursday, we had a webinar, and then we had invited 2 senior lawyers from big international firms, Raja and Tan and Clifford Chance. And then one of our guest panelists was the senior minister of Singapore for Ministry of Law and then Ministry of Health. So we talked about how it sort of affected Singapore, but they had locked the Singapore down. The measures that they implemented is called a circuit breaker, and it was in place for the last 2 months. So it was in place for the 1st April, and then it got renewed for another month. And then when we were coming out of it, which is we're supposed to be out of the circuit breaker now, but since the numbers were quite high, and then government was concerned with second spread, or even though circuit breaker has been lifted, it's been lifted with many restrictions or limitations. So retail shops are still closed. I'm still stationed at home because the instruction was, if you have been doing telework or telecommute, and if it's working for you, don't come to the office unless you are required to come, and unless there is really an equipment that you need out of the office to perform what you have to do. But we've been good, you know, in the past, so I felt that we have to follow the instruction. So we were going into 3rd month of lockdown, in short.
Okay, but I understand that your ICDR center operates remotely, and there's no any significant problems related to administration of cases?
Oh no, I think we're sort of glad that you brought that up. You know, when I think it dates back quite some time, but we invested, you know, a lot of money to set up servers, to have sort of a digital presence, not because of this, but from a long time ago. It sort of made sense then why we're doing this, but you know, some of us thought that, you know, why do we need it now? Why do we need it so early? But now we appreciate all the investment they have made, because now, not because of the COVID, but we have been doing online filing, online case management with pretty good case management software that we developed, and parties have been uploading, downloading, and viewing the documents online, and an arbitrator's been appointed using our digital network or websites. Now it's becoming more valuable than ever, but we've always had that. So there really is no significant interference. I do remember that when we had to sort of lock down, a lot of our case managers had desktop computers, but then we couldn't come to the office. So our IT department, I think, ordered hundreds of laptops, and then they were spending days without just working to set those up so people can take the laptop at home, because that's basically all we really needed. And then we can remotely connect. I have no idea what we're going to do when we come back with extra laptops that we have, because everybody will have desktop plus laptops. But I think it's been okay. We've been managing it, but we had to close all of our hearing facilities until September officially. So that's been hard. It's been hard for the parties because in an initial stage, you may be understanding, you may extend your professional courtesy to wait. But then when this thing got dragged on, some party wanted to move forward. But we were saying you can have a hearing, but just not in our facility. But AAA ICDR has been around so long, it's almost 95 years now. So people always had their hearings in our facilities, and wasn't really sure what to do, because to rent a hotel was quite expensive, and to go to other parties' office they didn't want to do. It basically meant that arbitrator would have to host or get someplace else. So that sort of still is a ongoing challenge now.
Yes, very interesting. But I believe now it's a good time for a second dish today.
Oh yeah.
What we're going to cook now is golden shrimp and hibachi shrimp. Just for me, because I am from a different part of the world, can you explain me what is the difference between golden shrimp and hibachi shrimp? Is it a different type of shrimps?
No, they're basically the same shrimp. Hibachi is just soy sauce based, and a golden shrimp, we use golden sauce. And I say that in a video that even though it's a homemade sauce, you can't really make it at home because it's too difficult. So I decided to make another dish just so you can sort of follow along at home. But hibachi shrimp, it's sort of in line with Japanese culture, where you don't overpower your dish with seasonings.
Okay, let's see a small video how to prepare golden and hibachi shrimps.
Okay, the second dish that we're gonna make is primarily just shrimp. We're gonna make two different variations of the shrimp. First shrimp is called the golden shrimp. We are going to use prawn and the golden sauce. Now this is sort of like a homemade mayo, except that you can't make this at home. Even in a Japanese restaurant, only the top chefs are allowed to make it, because it's sort of very hard to put it all together. But primary ingredients is egg yolk and oil. And for the second shrimp, I wanted to make it so simple that you can try it at home, but this is sort of representative of Japanese teppanyaki style culture. It's cooked on a hot pan with just nothing but a salt and pepper, a little bit of lemon, and the butter and soy sauce. But before we get to cooking, I wanted to talk about this sort of emblem here. This is AAA-ICDR emblem. I didn't mean to promote AAA-ICDR. It's just when we built our first office, I had this sign made and was in my office. And then when we were expanding into a bigger office, we had to take down the old office. So pretty much everything that we had in our old office had to go. And I just couldn't throw this away. So I sort of kept it, perhaps sentimental, but I couldn't throw it away, and I couldn't find the perfect place for this at the office, so I decided to keep it, and it's red, so it's pretty. So bear with me. So let's get to cooking. For the first golden shrimp, we are going to butterfly 3 shrimps. Now, when you're done butterflying the shrimp, we're going to place it in the pan. And using a spoon, we are going to put a golden sauce. Now, this has a wonderful flavor. It's really buttery and it's really rich, and you don't want to have too much though, because you don't feel so good if you have more than 3 pieces. So I recommend having just 3 pieces. But since you can't cook this at home anyway, when you go to a Japanese restaurant, if you see a golden shrimp, just try an appetizer maybe, and it's wonderful. And we are going to steam this. So medium to low heat with a little bit of water. And we're going to put a top on it. And then as you cook this, the golden sauce will sort of balloon up a little bit as it cooks the oil and an egg mixture inside. And then when it's done, you'll see it maybe double its size. And then when you cut it in, it'll feel like a tofu. It really has a wonderful flavor. And now while that's cooking, I am going to prepare a hibachi shrimp that is basically lemon and the soy sauce base. So for the hibachi shrimp, it's really easy. We'll just butterfly them in half. Butterfly it and cut it in half, just so it's quicker to cook. Key to a perfect shrimp is not cook it all the way through. One of the common mistakes that people make at home when they're cooking shrimp is they overcook it, and when you overcook it, it's dry. So when you're cooking at home, when you're cooking especially shrimp, try and see if you can cook it to medium well. And once you take it out of the pan, by the time you eat it, it'll cook all the way through. And when you cook it right, it should be filled with juice, so when you bite into it, it almost pops in your mouth. And that's the sort of a perfect texture that you're looking for. So when you look at the golden shrimp, as we see, waters are evaporating and it's steaming. Now I think the golden shrimp is ready. So let me show you what it looks like. So now this is what a finished golden shrimp looks like. And okay, now let me take it out. Now this will be the second dish. And if you remember, the first ginger dressing that we made, which is this one, is actually excellent on top of the golden shrimp. So we're gonna just take a little bit and then pour it on top. And that's the second dish. So now, using the same pan, let's get to the hibachi shrimp. We'll just use a little bit of oil and wait until pan gets hot. Now for this recipe, I am using the high heat because I want the shrimp to cook fast, but all the way through. Not quite all the way through, as I said, but medium well. A little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, now when it's about halfway done, we're going to use some lemon. When you're squeezing the lemon, if you put your hand here, you can catch the seeds that you probably don't want. So the moment you put lemon in, it's going to stem it. And I'm going to put a little bit of soy sauce and a little bit of butter. Here is the hibachi shrimp. So that's the end of the second dish.
It looks really, really delicious. But I'll tell you, the most challenging part for this dish, at least for me, sitting in Moscow, is where to get good shrimps. Because if you live like Singapore, you could get fresh shrimps and you could cook and it will be very nice. But you know, in our part of the world, you could buy only frozen shrimps. And with frozen shrimps, it might be a little bit different process. You need to refroze
I know.
it, but the taste will be a little bit different, not as good as this one. But let's our participants to do it while we continue our talk.
Sure.
And I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about ICDR. I've got some statistic from ICDR website with regard to number of cases. And it seems to me that there is some kind of drop of cases, not significant one, but still in recent years. I don't know what is statistics for 2019. Do you have numbers somewhere?
Yes, it's 9737.
9737, but it's for commercial disputes at AAA, right?
Yes. Yeah, no, it's for us, for the ICDR. So oh, I think this is AAA, the commercial.
Yeah, AAA. We'll come back to AAA. But although the bars are of different size, but frankly speaking, if you put a right scale, you could say that the number of disputes are more or less the same, around 1,000 cases per year, which is a pretty significant number, I could tell you. And what I also understood from your website, these are not only the cases under ICDR international rules, but you also have cases under AAA commercial rules. And I understand these are situation when the parties refer to commercial rules, but the parties are from different countries, right?
Yes. I think there are multiple rules in AAA. There are labor rules, construction rules, international rules, and commercial rules. And especially between international rules and commercial rules, they have their own strength. And I think a lot of US-based lawyers who are familiar with the commercial rule like the commercial rule. But they may have international parties, so they may have maybe a stronger bargaining power and insist on commercial rules. But other times, international rules are really designed to give more flexibilities because understanding international cannot move as fast as commercial. So there were a lot of features that we specifically sort of withheld when we're creating international rules, such as the time for drafting a word. Commercial rule has still has the set number of days. International rules used to not have a certain days, but now I think we revised it so it does have a 60-day limitations. So there are different sort of rules, and there's also UNCITRAL rules. So we do administer cases under various rules.
So my understanding, when one of the parties is foreign to US, then this dispute goes for administration to ICDR. Is it
yes,
correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, okay. And you mentioned that you have in commercial rules 60 days limit for issuing award. And when this time limit starts to run?
When the hearing is declared closed, at least in our rule, the day that the arbitrator declares the hearing closed has its own unique significance, because from that point on, the clock starts running. So what we mean by the close of hearing is when arbitrator is satisfied that he had everything, he has everything, or he or she has everything he needs to make a decision. So it includes post-submissions, post-hearing submissions. So if those are pending, then arbitrator will not declare the hearing closed. But once every document is in, then that's the day that arbitrator will declare the hearing is closed, no more submissions. And from that day on, then the clock starts to run.
And I also found interesting statistics on your website, interesting case law by industry. And if the left side, 225% increase of cases related to cannabis. What is that?
Well, this I think if you just look at this chart, it's sort of a misrepresentation of the entire case law. The first one is actually marijuana, and under United States law, the federal law still is illegal, but there are a lot of states that have own state law that legalize marijuana. And I think, I'm not 100% sure, but a lot of those cases have investment element in it, investment on the sort of distribution and manufacturing. So just like any other industry, it has manufacturing, it has distribution, it has retail, and parties or people, I think, invest money in those things. And depending on the states, if I'm not wrong, a lot of state law requires that it has to be one sort of entity that has to manufacture and distribute and then do a retail shops. So a lot of, I think, investors are interested in investing in that company. So sure, it's about marijuana, but you know, aside from that, it looks much like just sort of regular investment. And I don't think we used to have this category, and we used to have, you know, little or a very small number of, I guess, marijuana-related commercial disputes. But then when it got popular and then more states have legalized it, we're beginning to see more of these related cases. So it's not like we had, you know, 400 cases and then it doubled. I think it started off as maybe less than 2-digit numbers. And then now that we have a little bit more, when you factor that in as a growth, you get 225% growth.
Yeah, and my understanding also that Singapore has a very strict regulation on illegal drugs, and everyone who is flying to Singapore received a warning that there is a death penalty for illegal drug trafficking and so on and so forth. So I would assume that your office, ICDR office in Singapore, does not administer these cases. These are the states.
We haven't had a chance to administer marijuana-related commercial dispute just yet, but Singapore is very strict, and they're not shy about it either. When you're in an airplane to Singapore during the flight, the flight attendant will make an announcement, and then it simply says, you know how strict it is when it comes to drugs in Singapore, so you better not be carrying anything, because if you do, we'll probably kill you. Something to that effect, not verbatim, but it's clean here.
This is probably not to try administer cannabis-related cases, because Singaporean authorities would consider it as like a kind of facilitating in illegal trade. I also, in your website, a very interesting chart, which makes comparison of ICDR fees and administrative charges with 6 other international arbitration centers, with LCA, Stockholm, SIAC, HKC, and ICC. And my first question to you is, we just looked into various rules, and we know that there are 3 different most frequently used rules. ICDR rules for international disputes, commercial rules, and the ancestral rules. When you're making this comparison on costs, is it average on all rules, or you took into account particular, whatever, international rules?
I don't think we sort of made a different categories for different sort of rules. And I really, personally, I don't really like this chart because it compares us to the other institutions. And I don't think that's the point that we were trying to make with this one. The reason that we end up sort of being a lower end is not because our administrative fee was lower or because our arbitrators charge less. I think when it comes to administrative fees, we're somewhere in between major institutions. And the arbitrators rate, it's up there as well, because they are not sort of unique to our process. Good arbitrators are on our list, on anybody else's list as well. So just because they have our cases doesn't mean they would charge less. So in that sense, this graph may be sort of misleading. What this graph really sort of signify is that because of the process itself, where we encourage mediation, where we sort of divide the filing fees and then arbitrator compensation into installments, we're providing more opportunities for the parties to try and settle, either by themselves or an assistant with a mediator. So the result of this is the cause of that chart is because, okay, you put it up, because majority of our cases actually settle. And when you settle, the way that our fees is structured is you don't pay for the proceed fee and the final fee, and you don't pay the arbitrator's compensation for the most part if the case settles earlier than certain dates from the scheduled hearing. So it's not because our administrative fee is lower or our arbitrators charge less, but because the process encourages settlements and negotiations. And when you come to that, you end up saving a lot of money.
Yeah, what I also found interesting in your website is that percent of cases settled is 72%. It's a very high number.
Yes, it is.
And my question to you, how you are able to achieve it? What kind of magic tools you are using to make parties to settle?
Okay, we, just to be clear, we didn't discuss this prior to the call, but thanks for asking that question, because we don't have a big, huge policy in place for the settlement. What we're trying to do is we are encouraging our case administrators, case managers, to see if they can introduce mediation to the parties. So every step of the way, when the case is filed, we encourage parties to mediate. And to be perfectly honest, about 9 times out of 10, parties do say no. want to just go straight, into the arbitrations. But there are 10 times when party says, okay, maybe. So we know how difficult it is for the parties to sort of bring up the mediation because there's a fear of, do I look weak if I say I want to try and settle? So it has to be the institution who encourages settlements. And then when that happens, the case manager has to be sort of encouraged to promote it. But when parties actually say yes to mediation, that becomes another case sort of file that we have to open and go through the process of appointing mediations. So, and then we don't charge for those initial filing fee or additional filing fee for the mediation. So it was sort of doubling their workload. So we were scared, what if they don't really encourage mediation? So we created an incentive program where if case managers are successful at convincing parties to try and mediate, they get a small bonus, whether the case actually settles or not. So it's not a huge policy, but it's sort of built into the culture of dispute resolution. We are trying to see if parties can come to an agreement, because even though arbitration may have started, the award may not be the best sort of result that you can get. There are a lot of other detours that you can take that may lead to the better solution. So we encourage mediation 100% of the time, and then we encourage negotiation 100% of the time. And the way that our our filing fees are structured, it's not you pay the whole thing and then that's it. We break it down to three. So there's an initial filing fee, there's a proceed fee, and there is a final fee. So if you come to an agreement and settle, then you may not even have to pay the proceed fee or final fee, and you may not even have to pay for the arbitrator's compensation. You are liable for the work that actually the arbitrator has actually done. So there are a lot of incentives that are built in throughout the process to encourage settlement. So I think it's two factors: the corporate culture that promotes mediation and negotiations, and then the fee structure that encourages party or create incentive for the parties to settle. I think that's what leads to high number of settled cases.
And also, this question for you. Many European companies are afraid to go to US market and to US litigation because of discovery. Discovery is, I believe, a nightmare of litigation in US. But from other side, it encourages or forces the parties to settle to avoid significant costs related to discovery. So my question to you is, how often from your experience the tribunals are using e-discovery or limited discovery or full-scale discovery in arbitrations administered under ICDR rules or commercial rules?
I think we've seen a lot of variations. A lot of times parties adopt IBA rules. But I think what's more important is it's our rule and the way we see discovery. We knew what other people were thinking, just like you described, US litigation type discovery. Parties expect that if there is US side, or if you get a US arbitrators, you will open yourself to an immense amount of discovery that may bankrupt you. So, and even though it's not really our sort of a problem uniquely, I think the discovery is a problem throughout the whole international arbitration industry. But we had to make a stronger point. So we did put it in our rule. I think we may be the only institution that has such a rule. What used to be a guideline now is a part of the rule, which specifically says in international arbitrations, those type of US style discoveries, interrogatories, and depositions are not allowed. And then we gave a lot of powers to the arbitrators to reject the request for the discovery, because we were trying to encourage arbitrators to manage their cases, say no to the discovery request. And then arbitrators all came back and said, unless you empower me, I would tend to include more evidence than reject them. So we took what we used to have as a guideline and then put that in our rule, so arbitrators couldn't cite it, saying, as you can see in our in the ICDR's international rule, these are not allowed, and I have the power to make the final call. So that applies, interestingly, even if parties agree to expanded discoveries, because there may be Chinese parties and then US party, but they all appoint US lawyers. And then two lawyers may come together and then agree to expanded, scope. Arbitrator can override them, saying, no, that's too much.
But under commercial rules, I understand that discovery is still allowed, and it might be the reason
Yes,
why parties
I
are
think so.
choosing commercial rules for international disputes.
Well, that's why I think we sort of encourage parties to use international rule, because the international rule sort of reflects that. And then our basis for our commercial rule, I think, I could be wrong, but it was sort of created for the US culture. And even in the United States, even though you ask for discovery, I think there is a strong sort of a movement against discovery that's just too much. At least that's what international folks are trying to inspire US domestic people.
Well, I believe I was in the United States almost 30 years ago, and I believe even at that time there was movement against discovery. But this movement is still there.
Yeah, yes, I know. But we're trying to fight it.
Yeah. Okay. There's also interesting feature of your rules related to emergency measures, right? And you have a special procedure for, is it emergency arbitrator or is it a tribunal taking this emergency measures? How it works under your rules?
Yes, we're actually, I know a lot of other institutions talk about emergency measures, and it's a hot topic for others to talk about, and indeed it is. But we actually happen to be the very first one who pioneered this area. We used to have something similar in our commercial rules, but then it wasn't being utilized as much as we saw, and we thought that this will be very, very beneficial, especially in international setting. So we decided to adopt it, but we did make a modification when we were taking the emergency arbitration portion of the rule from the commercial rule and transferring to international. What we did was we changed it so it becomes a opt-out provision. So it applies automatically unless parties opt out of it. Before, under commercial rule, it was opt-in provision, meaning it didn't apply unless parties sort of agree that emergency measures will apply. And from that point on, it was kind of controversial at an earlier stage, but I think the industry in a couple of years later saw the benefits to it. So I think after 2 years, Stockholm Center adopted a very similar version. And then about a year later, after that, SEAC adopted a very similar versions. And then sometime later, then ICC created their own versions and have them. So I think it's good because if it benefits the entire industry, then we don't mind sharing the idea because it works.
Yeah, you know that I personally was against the interim measures in arbitration simply because there was no enforcement for state courts. There are some limited countries which enforce interim measures, but majority of countries don't. So my position was, well, if you want to have real interim measures, you should go to state courts rather than to tribunal. But then I have to say I reconsidered my view when I saw how many parties are voluntarily complying with interim measures. Because the parties want to win the dispute, they don't want to look like a bad guys in the eyes of the tribunal. So if the tribunal issues interim measures, the parties voluntarily comply with it in majority of cases.
You know, in an initial stage, there were a lot of skepticisms and a lot of views against it. And there are, different standards. And in some part of the world, you may not even need it, or you cannot even have it. Like in China, only the state courts can issue interim measures. And in London and in Korea, the courts move faster. But when we were considering it, the nature of the emergency measure is you need something done quickly, either to freeze assets of somebody else. And without this, parties were forced to go to national courts. And if there are multiple jurisdictions, because the assets were spread out, multiple jurisdictions, that meant a different standard for each jurisdictions and having to hire lawyers for different jurisdictions and filing. And then what if you come with a conflicting decisions? So our idea of emergency arbitration wasn't really to compete with the state court or say that you shouldn't go to state court, but we were trying to create an option for parties to use if they want to, because the reason that international arbitration wasn't fully utilized when it comes to emergency measures or interim measures was it takes us, all institutions, long time before we can, put together a tribunal, sometimes a month, 2, 3, and that's when you need interim measures right away. When you need interim measures right away, even though there's national law allows the arbitrations to issue interim measures, we didn't have a people. So when we're creating emergency arbitrations, the idea was there, but we had to make sure that things happen quickly. So within 24 hours, we reach out, we get people, but also there were different standards as well. So that was sort of challenging when there was nobody to sort of copy from. So some parts, there's an ex parte emergency relief that is allowed. In some part of the world, notice is required. So how do you create a rule that satisfies multiple jurisdictions? So we went by the higher standard where we require a notice to be served on the other side for emergency relief.
Yes, Michael, we need to speed up a little bit because we have still issues.
Yeah.
Before we're going
Sorry.
I want to show some statistics related to diversity at ICDR. And I noticed that 22% of ICDR panel is female, and so also 22% is female, and 22% of cases had a female arbitrator appointed. And just a question to you, do you see the same ratio in appointment of female arbitrators from the parties and from institutions? Because what we saw—
that's hard.
Yes.
What we can do, we can control. What others do, we don't have a right to control what they do. At least what we're trying to do is, if we have put it in our system, so when you follow our workflow using our software, when we're putting together a list of arbitrators for the potential case, there is a pop-up window that pops up and saying, have you satisfied 20% diversity requirements? And then if we say no, then we have to write a reason why we couldn't have other female arbitrator listed. So it's much easier for the case manager to just find a female arbitrator, so that way we can fulfill the requirement. But I think there's a policy question. Diversity, for the sake of having female arbitrator, then that's a diversity done wrong. So we wanted to provide more opportunities for them to sort of grow and then get the experience, because we don't have it's chicken and egg. We don't appoint them, how can they accumulate experience? So we do what we can, but especially in Asia, I think for the chair arbitrators, parties tend to stay with sort of a male senior level arbitrators. But we're seeing some changes, but we are trying.
Okay, let's talk about the third dish. This is fried rice, and I understand that it's pretty traditional in Chinese cuisine. We have a list of ingredients for it, and we also have a nice video I want to share. Just a second.
Okay, the third dish we're gonna make is a fried rice. Now, if you live in the United States or if you had fried rice, it's probably a Chinese fried rice. And we're gonna make that today, but first I wanted to make a Japanese version of the fried rice. Japanese version of the fried rice, actually it's a little bit sweeter, so a lot of times people use, the restaurants use teriyaki sauce, but since we don't have teriyaki sauce, or at least we could make it, we're gonna try and see if we can mimic the flavor of a teriyaki sauce. And once we're done with the Japanese fried rice, we'll make a simple Chinese egg fried rice. It's the simplest version of the Chinese fried rice. And to that, I'm gonna tell you how to make Chinese fried rice even better, like the ones that you'll probably have at Chinese restaurant. But we'll get to that a little bit later. But before we get to the fried rice, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the grain of rice that we're gonna use. Today we're gonna use a short grain rice, and typically Chinese fried rice are made with long grain fried rice, long grain rice. And long grain rice are less stickier than the short grain. And short grain rice are generally used in Japanese and Korean cooking. And Chinese long grain rice is used throughout China and other parts of the world. And today we're gonna use short grain. And let's get to some chopping. So for this recipe, we're gonna use one onion and carrot and maybe a little green onion. And then to that, we're gonna add some egg. Now let's cut some carrots. And a little bit of green onion. Okay, now that we're done with the chopping, we're gonna get the fire going. Now for Chinese fried rice or any kind of fried rice, you're gonna want to use a high heat. And that's how you sort of fry, but coat all the grain of rice with the oil. So you're gonna need plenty of oil and a very hot wok. We're gonna start cooking the onions and carrots first. Now when the onions and carrots are almost done, we're gonna add one egg. We're gonna push the onion and carrot to the side And the other area, we're going to use 1 egg, and then we're going to scramble it really fast. And to that, we're going to use a rice, 1 cup of rice. Typically in Chinese cooking or in Korean, in Japanese, the rice that we use for fried rice is usually a leftover from last night. So the rice gets really dried and cold, and you don't have to work so hard to sort of disassemble the rice. But in this case today, it's a fresh rice, so it's a little bit harder. But if you work at it with a spatula, you sort of, smush it down, then you can break them apart. The idea is coat every single grain of rice with the oil. Now we're gonna season it a little bit. Salt and some pepper, and fry just a little bit more. And I feel that we're almost there, so we're going to put just a little bit of soy sauce and the sugar, a little kicker. Oh, it smells wonderful. And we're going to use a little bit of green onion now, just so we can preserve the color. So the colors will pop later on. So I think our first fried rice is ready. So let me plate it. We'll turn the fire off. And there is the Japanese style fried rice. Okay, now let's get started on the Chinese fried rice. The Chinese fried rice, in terms of the ingredients are concerned, it doesn't really get any simpler than this. Basically, all you need is just egg and rice, and maybe a little bit of green onion. However, the difficulty is the technique of cooking it. We really need a hot wok and a good amount of oil. And to that, we are going to scramble 2 eggs. Now you're gonna cook the egg about halfway, or a little more than a half. Once you cook that, and then we're gonna add the rice, and then try to coat the rice with the oil with the egg. Okay, now our egg is almost done. So to that, we're gonna add 1 bowl of rice. And now we are going to season it. Now, I promised you a little secret to make your fried rice really good. And here is that secret. It's none other than this guy. It's actually chicken powder, chicken stock powder, to be exact. Just put a little bit. And this will enhance the flavor. It gives the fried rice a depth. So now when we're almost done, we are going to add our green onion and finish it. Okay, So let's plate it. This is egg fried rice. All right, that's
Yes.
it.
Very nice. I understand the principal difference between Japanese fried rice and Chinese fried rice. That for Japanese, you're also using onions and carrots, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And for Chinese, you're using a little bit chicken powder.
Hmm. Well, Japanese rice, fried rice are a little bit sweeter because of the teriyaki, and because we didn't have the teriyaki sauce. Main ingredient for the teriyaki sauce is soy sauce, ginger, and sugar.
Soy sauce, ginger.
So I just added sugar.
Okay, it's a secret. Okay, good. Let's talk a little bit more about ICDR. Again, we need to speed a little bit because the time is running. From your statistics, I understood that the main users of ICDR international service are parties from Canada, United Kingdom, Mexico, India, China, Germany, Switzerland, France, Colombia, and Spain. But I noticed that there are a significant part from India and China. And I believe this is what prompted ICDR to open office in Singapore, right?
Yes.
And you shared with us nice photos of ICDR office in Singapore. I understand that you also have hearing rooms here.
Yeah.
No?
Maxwell Chambers suite. Maxwell Chambers does.
Okay. And on this photo, tell me who are on this photo.
Okay, the gentleman on your far left, the tall one is me, and then the lady next to me is India Johnson. She's the president of the AAA, and then the next gentleman is Eric Tuckman. He's my boss. He's the senior VP, but also he's the general counsel of AAA. So he handles all the legal issues that are related to the AAA, and also he watches over the ICDR. And then the next nice lady is the Smriti Rameshi. She's my director in our Asia Case Management Center.
So you have a lot of bosses on top of you, right?
No, actually, Smriti works for me, but her title is director. I'm the head of the Asia.
Oh, okay. So you are her boss, not vice versa. Okay. And
I think she acts like she's my boss, and she does a whole lot more than me. So, and she knows more than me.
Of course, she's supposed to know more than you, but certainly not how to make, Chinese and Japanese style rice.
But this picture is actually Korea.
Yeah.
So the gentleman on the far left hand is Michael Clark. He's our marketing VP. And then the next one is Steve Anderson. He is ICDR Vice President in charge of Mexico, some part of the United States, and then Canada. And then the next one,
Okay, so I understand you are very active in promoting your Asian branch in the region, and because you have parties from China, from India, what I noticed when I look into statistics of Singapore, for example, International Arbitration Center, they have also a lot of parties from India and from the United States. And because ICDR is home to US companies, I would assume they should have interest in having a dispute management team of ICDR sitting close to India and China.
Yes, it wasn't really a difficult decision to make in terms of picking Singapore as Asia Case Management Center. What took us long was, I don't know why it took us so long, but it just made a perfect sense because without the Asia Case Management Center, when we have operating centers throughout all the United States, and we have a few, what we were doing was we were creating sort of inherent disadvantage for the parties that are based in Asia, because even though we want to be neutral, we were closed during their business hours. So if they write an email, then they will get a reply the next day. So by creating an Asia Case Management Center, the idea was to not only overcome the business hour or operating hour difficulties, but to create a team where one team sits, so part of our team sits both in the United States and Singapore. So we can, Asia Case Management Center can handle parties' inquiries and then a direct point of contact for Asian parties. And then for American parties, then our US counterparts can do that. So, and they work on the same case. So that way, technically, we're open, not 24 hours, but close to 20 hours a day. So there's always somebody that they can talk to or get a quick reply. And each of them will have a thorough knowledge about what was going on in that particular case because it is their case. So it was more of a practical approach instead of a development part. We do that and we try, but the idea was to serve the Asian parties better because we already had a decent number of Asian cases. And I do hope that there are more cases for us because it's quite underrepresented. If you look at our chart, Asia is about half of the entire world. If we include Russia, if we include Australia and India, but from our statistics, it's only about 20%. So I think there's a room for growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about your fourth dish, which is spicy chicken with melted cheese.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yes, I would assume so. Just before we go to video, is it a must to do it spicy chicken, or you could do it not spicy?
Oh, when you cook Korean dish, and then if you ask Koreans like me, if you can do not spicy, my answer will be no, because then there's no point. But I do make a second dish with not spicy. But when you're making spicy Korean dish, boy, it has to be spicy.
Okay, let's see. Let's see the video.
Okay, the last dish we're gonna make is chicken. I'm gonna try and make a spicy Korean chicken with melted cheese on top. But to make that recipe, you do need some specialty, some special ingredients. First thing you're gonna need is the chili powder, and the second one is the chili paste. I'm not sure, but perhaps in Russia they have Asian store, and if you can't find an Asian market, then you could definitely find a chili paste and then chili powder. But just in case you can't find chili paste or chili powder, I am going to make a different version of the chicken, just using soy sauce and sugar. So it's this type, the soy sauce and the sugar is a bulgogi type, and then the chili paste is a spicy one. So let's make the first one using chicken and then chili paste and then a lot of vegetables. So let's get to chopping. So for the chicken, I am going to make 2 portions of it so we can make a 2 different dish. And what you're doing is simply just cutting it in thin pieces so it's easier to eat later on. Okay, now the chicken is done. We're gonna start cutting cabbage, some onion and some carrots, and then to even spice things up a little bit, we're gonna use some chili peppers. These are the only things that are available in Singapore, but if you're in the United States, you can perhaps use jalapenos. I don't know what type of chilies that you can find in Russia, but whatever you can find should be fine. And if you want to make your food even more spicier, then you can use more of the chilies. Okay, so before I start cutting the vegetables, I'm gonna get the pan going. and then brown my chicken. For this one, since we're making 2 chicken dish, I'm only going to use half of it. So let me wait until the pan heats up, and then let's start cutting. For this recipe, we're going to use 1/4 of cabbage. And onion. Okay, I think the pan is nice and hot. So I'm using only half of the chicken. Now this is the sizzle that you want to hear. While that's browning, let me finish up the chopping. And for this, we're going to use 3 garlic. I think the chicken is getting brown. Nice. And to that, we're going to first use garlic and onion. Cabbage. And season it with salt and pepper. Now when they're about halfway done, the vegetable will be sort of translucent. And that's when we're going to start adding the flavors. Okay, chicken's looking good. Now I'm going to add a little bit of soy sauce, not too much. Now for the spicy stuff. Chili paste. Chili powder. And maybe just a couple of chilies. You'll see it turning red. Now the dish is almost done. We're going to add a little bit of sugar, just so there's a little bit of sweetness to it. Food that is just spicy hot, not really good. You need some sweets. So I think now the dish looks good. So to that, I'm going to reduce the heat to low. And then put some cheese on top. And I'm going to put a cover on it so the cheese will melt. And then we'll just wait a little bit until the cheese melt. Okay, I think cheese has melted. I'm going to turn off the heat. Now using a torch, I'm going to brown the cheese a little bit so it looks delicious. Now let me see if I can get this off the plate without breaking its form. Have it, the last dish. Now don't worry, we're gonna finish cooking with the other leftover chicken with soy sauce and sugar. Okay. Okay, now let's get to the soy sauce based chicken. You can get the pan going just like I did before. Wait until it's hot. In goes the chicken. Put garlic in first. To that, we're gonna add onion. And the cabbage. And season it. And the salt and pepper. Now, for those of you who cannot have spicy food, this will be a pretty good chicken dish. Now, to that, we're going to use the soy sauce and equal amount of sugar. Okay, I think this looks good. We're going to reduce the heat just like we did before. And add cheese. Put a lid. Okay, now I think the cheese has melted. So we'll kill the power. Now, once again, we're going to use the torch to make it beautiful. Now, if you don't have a torch, you can actually just put it in the oven to melt the cheese. There is the final product. See if I can put it on the plate. And there you have it. Okay, I hope you liked the whole thing. I don't know if you're gonna like the fusion Japanese Korean style, but I hope you like it. Thank you.
Yes, you raised the bar very high in terms of cooking. I know what I'm going to do this weekend. I'm not sure prepare all 4 dishes, but at least some of them I'll certainly do it. Send you a photo.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Before we leave, I still have a couple of questions about AAA, and I want very much your comment on it. because I look at the website of AAA and I found amazing the numbers. So AAA administered since 1926 more than 6 million cases. And then 5 months of this year is 162,000. And if you look into B2B disputes, I understand a lot are consumer-related cases, but still B2B cases in 2019, we have almost 10,000 cases. And I mean, we are conducting this kitchen for many countries, and I could tell you that I don't think there's any country which could match this number in terms of disputes resolved through arbitration. And also, in terms of commercial cases, again, if you look into 2018 statistics, you'll see what are various services and total amount of claims and counterclaims, which are 15 billion, I believe, US dollars, which is pretty high number. I also noticed on the AAA website how AAA is advanced in terms of new technologies, because it started in 1992 with internet, connecting its offices online for the first time. I have to admit that in 1992, I was using typing machine, mechanical typing machines. Well, there were some, computers which I use in my office, which were like a military with metal keyboards, computers with operating memory 360 kilobytes, which you use basically as a typing machine, but you started at AAA internet already. So here we see various timelines. So it's not surprised that now you could work remotely, despite of pandemic and all related stuff. But the thing I want to talk to you, which amazed me a lot about AAA, this is what happened with Hurricane Katrina, because Hurricane Katrina was a disaster, at least for 2 states in the United States. And the courts were expected a lot of insurance-related disputes. And at that time, AAA offered its assistance in resolving disputes related to insurance coverage. And there were more than, if you look into statistics, almost 18,000 cases which were mediated by use of AAA, and 76% of cases were settled. For me, this is absolutely amazing numbers, and this is a very good example how arbitration association could come to assist the government and the judiciary in resolving the cases at difficult times. And I also saw AAA, some kind of information that AAA is also now assisting in disputes related to COVID situation in the United States, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Again, I'm really sorry that I'm not able to ask you more questions because we are running out of time, but because we touched this issue with COVID-19, here I provide information about foundation of World Health Organization. Any donation to this foundation would be helpful to fight pandemia. The interview was taken by Vladimir Khvaley, who is the chairman of the board of Russian Arbitration Association. It was not the last series of our arbitration kitchen, but very amazing one. I could tell you in terms of cooking, I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about ICDR and AAA. Guys, you are doing very good and amazing things, and keep doing it.
Okay. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Next kitchen, we will see this Thursday on Russian language. We will be interviewing Alexander Shmarko, who will talk to young lawyers how to make career in international arbitration, how to get scholarship on international arbitration, how to get training at law firms, how to participate in various moods. I believe it also would be very useful for our young generation of lawyers how to become their arbitration lawyer. On this, I conclude our webinar. Thank you very much, Michael, for your interview and for lessons. It was very, very useful and interesting.
Thank you very much.